I've been lurking on some forums for a while now, never really thinking I had a story worth telling. I didn't think my own sister was capable of something like this, but here we are. I'm getting married in less than a month to the most incredible man, Dylan, the absolute love of my life. I could go on and on about him, but this story isn't about my amazing relationship. It's about the complete implosion of my relationship with my family. 4 weeks, the centerpiece of our quiet little Austin bungalow was my wedding dress. It was hanging in the spare room, a shimmering beacon of a future I was so excited for. It cost $7,500, a designer piece my grandmother insisted on buying me. Growing up, I never had many nice things. I was always the quiet, artistic one, while my older sister Morgan was the star, the influencer, the one who took up all the oxygen in the room. This dress. It wasn't just fabric and lace. It was a symbol. It was proof that after a lifetime of feeling invisible, I was finally being seen. It was the one perfect, beautiful thing that was completely mine. That was the feeling I held on to. Pure, simple happiness. Then about a week ago I came home from work to a smell I'll never forget. Acrid smoke and something sickeningly sweet like burnt plastic. In the middle of my backyard, on the very spot where Dylan and I were supposed to say our vows, was a smoldering blackened heap of tulle and silk. My dress. It was ruined. You just don't expect to come home to something like that. I'm not ashamed to admit I collapsed right there on the grass and just cried. Once the shock wore off and Dylan helped me inside, a cold, hard rage started to build in its place. I racked my brain trying to figure out who could do something so vicious. Very few people had a key. We pulled up the security camera footage, my heart pounding with every click of the mouse. And there she was. My sister Morgan. The video was horrifyingly clear. It showed her letting herself in with a key, dragging my dress out into the yard and dousing it with lighter fluid. She set it on fire with this manic, gleeful look on her face. She even propped her phone up and live-streamed the entire thing to some private social media group, ranting about how I didn't deserve a day in the spotlight. She just stood there watching my dream burn until she was sure it was beyond saving. Then she put out the fire and just left. Seeing the footage, I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was furious. I never had a great relationship with my sister, but this was the absolute last straw. My hands were shaking as I dialed my parents. I just knew that Morgan had gotten the key from them. They were the only ones with a spare and there was no sign of a break-in. When my mom Jessica answered, I didn't even say hello. I just told them what Morgan had done. I expected shock, maybe even outrage on my behalf. Instead, I was met with a wall of defensiveness. They immediately started trivializing it, making excuses. Morgan was stressed. She was not herself. They were more concerned about protecting her pristine lifestyle influencer image than the fact that she had committed a crime against her own sister. It was the same story my entire life. If Morgan failed an exam, the teacher was evil. If a boy she liked asked someone else to prom, he was blind. If she tripped on the sidewalk, the city council needed to be called. It was always someone else's fault. But this was a whole new level of enabling. My wedding was just weeks away. The dress was irreplaceable. And their response? My dad, Michael, got on the phone and had the audacity to offer me $5,000. Not as an apology but as hush money. $5,000 to just drop it, not involve the police and pretend this disgusting act of hatred never happened. That was the moment something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about a dress anymore. This was about them trying to buy my silence, trying to erase my pain to make their golden child comfortable. I was so disgusted I just hung up. There was only one person left to call. My grandmother Melissa. She'd always seen through Morgan's act and had scolded my parents for years about spoiling her. I told her everything. The dress, the security footage, the livestream, the bribe. There was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard her take a deep, sharp breath. She wasn't just angry, she was incandescent with rage. She told me she was calling her lawyer. Not even an hour later my phone rang again. It was Grandma. She had delivered the first devastating consequence. You see, she was contributing to both of our weddings. Morgan had a $20,000 wedding trust waiting for her. My grandmother had just revoked it, combined it with my own $20,000 trust, and gifted me the entire $40,000. A financial atom bomb had just landed and it was aimed directly at my sister. Fueled by my grandmother's fierce support, I knew exactly what I had to do next. I drove straight to the police station, the security footage saved on a flash drive in my purse. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. The fear and hurt were still there, but now they were overshadowed by a cold, hard resolve. I sat with an officer and calmly laid out the facts, filing a formal complaint against Morgan for trespassing, theft, and destruction of property. Having the crime officially on record was a relief, a solid foundation for everything that was about to happen. My next move was to call my parents. I needed to draw a line in the sand so deep they could never cross it again. When my mom answered, her voice was already defensive, but I didn't give her a chance to start. I told her I had just left the police station. She started to protest, but I cut her off. I calmly deployed the boundary I had been practicing in my head the entire drive over. First, I stated the behavior. You defended Morgan's criminal actions and you tried to bribe me into silence. Then I stated my boundary. I will not have that kind of toxicity, enabling, or emotional manipulation anywhere near my wedding day. Finally, I delivered the consequence. Therefore you, Dad, and Morgan are all uninvited. If any of you show up, I will have security escort you off the property. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could practically hear their shock turning into sputtering rage. My dad got on the extension and they both exploded, calling me cruel, ungrateful, and a witch for turning on my own family. They accused me of trying to ruin Morgan's life, of being jealous, of letting our grandmother poison me against them. It was a masterclass in deflection and victim blaming. But for the first time in my life, their words didn't penetrate. I had built a wall and it was made of iron. I let them finish their tirade and then I simply said, "My decision is final," and I ended the call. I sat there in my car, the quiet buzzing in my ears. I had just detonated a bomb in the middle of my family, but I didn't feel regret. I felt peace. I was finally choosing myself. The point of no return had been crossed and I was the one who had crossed it. When Morgan found out about the police report and the loss of her $20,000 wedding fund, she didn't just unravel, she completely disintegrated. All that venomous envy she had for me getting married first, for my happiness, it all pivoted from my wedding and aimed directly at my relationship with Dylan. She launched a full-scale sabotage mission, and it started with a series of increasingly unhinged text messages to my fiancé. At first, it was pathetic attempts at manipulation. She called me the fat sister, telling Dylan he was making a huge mistake and that he could do so much better. Dylan, being the incredible man he is, immediately showed me the messages. We were disgusted but not surprised. He blocked her number but she just started messaging him from different apps. The desperation escalated quickly. A few hours later, a new message popped up on his phone. It was a picture of Morgan posing in skimpy lingerie with the caption, "Here's what you're missing." Dylan didn't even hesitate. He simply typed back, "This is extremely inappropriate. I am not interested and frankly I can't stand you." He wanted to leave no room for interpretation. He showed her nothing but contempt. You would think that would be the end of it. That the humiliation would be enough to make her stop. But we were dealing with someone who had no shame, no moral compass. Her next message was the final, horrifying escalation. She sent Dylan a completely nude photograph of herself. The text beneath it read, "Do you still think you hate me?" My first instinct was pure white-hot rage. I wanted to drive to her apartment and physically drag her to the police station myself. But Dylan stopped me. He held me and let me vent, and as the anger subsided, something else took its place. A chilling clarity. This act didn't drive a wedge between us. It fused us together. We were a team facing down a level of depravity we hadn't thought possible. My sister had crossed every conceivable line. But she also just handed us the perfect weapon. We looked at each other and we knew exactly what we had to do. It was time to show her fiancé, Caleb, exactly what kind of person he was about to marry. He liked playing with fire. It was time she got burned. We invited Caleb over to our house the next evening. We told him we needed to discuss something important about Morgan in private. The atmosphere was incredibly tense as Dylan led him out to our back deck, the very spot where my dress had been turned to ash. We sat him down and I felt a pang of sympathy for him. He seemed like a genuinely good guy, and he had no idea his entire world was about to be turned upside down. We didn't sugarcoat it. We decided the only way to do this was to show him everything, to let the evidence speak for itself. Dylan started by playing the security footage on his laptop. Caleb watched, his face paling as he saw Morgan, his fiancée, dragging my wedding dress across the lawn with a vicious sneer on her face. Then we showed him the screen recording of her private live stream, her manic hate-filled rant about me. His expression went from shock to disbelief. But the final blow was the text messages. Dylan handed him his phone and Caleb slowly scrolled through the conversation. He saw the insults, the lingerie photos, and then he stopped, his breath catching in his throat as he stared at the final explicit picture. His face just crumbled. It was painful to watch. But beneath the raw hurt and humiliation, I saw something else flicker in his eyes. Relief. After a long, heavy silence, he looked up at us. He confessed that Morgan had pressured him into proposing, giving him an ultimatum that if he didn't, she would leave him. He admitted he'd been having severe doubts for months, feeling trapped and insecure about their future. Our evidence wasn't just a betrayal. It was a validation of every gut feeling he'd been trying to ignore. It was the horrifying permission he needed to save himself. He thanked us, his voice thick with emotion. He stood up, left our house, and immediately called off his wedding. The power had completely flipped. We had taken back control. The climax of it all came 2 hours later. A car screeched to a halt outside, and a hysterical Morgan appeared on our porch, pounding on the door and screaming about how I had ruined her life. But we were prepared. Without a moment's hesitation, Dylan called the police. They arrived within minutes and escorted a sobbing, spitting Morgan off our property. The show was finally over. The fallout was swift and total. A few weeks later, we had our court date. Faced with indisputable video evidence, Morgan was ordered to pay me $10,000 in restitution for the dress, the property damage and emotional distress. Of course, she didn't have that kind of money, so our parents did what they always do. They enabled her. They drained their savings account to pay her debt, a final, pathetic act of protection for their golden child. When my grandmother heard about this, she made her final move. She had her lawyer draw up new documents. My parents' inheritance was officially changed to a symbolic $100, just enough so they couldn't legally contest the will. She then granted me full power of attorney over her affairs, ensuring that if she ever became incapacitated, I, and not the people who had betrayed our family's integrity, would be the one to make decisions for her. They were completely cut off. A few days after that, a small package arrived for me. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a handwritten note from Caleb. It said, "For the honeymoon you deserve. Thank you for saving me." Holding that check, I didn't feel triumph, just a profound sense of relief. Vindicated and finally free from the cloud of their toxicity, Dylan and I got married. We didn't need a grand venue. We said our vows right there in our beautiful Austin backyard, on the very spot where my old life had been burned away, surrounded by a small group of friends and my grandmother, our true chosen family. The air was filled with laughter and love, not drama and resentment. Standing there holding my husband's hand, I looked at the new grass growing where the scorch mark used to be. I realized that sometimes, to build something new and healthy, you have to be willing to burn down the old structures. You have to let go of the family you were given to make room for the family you choose. Our new life wasn't just built on love. It was forged in fire, and we had never been stronger.